Cooper, welcome into the Quick Out Fantasy Football live stream here on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm social channels. I'm John Impemba again with Andrew Cooper. Coop, last week we talked best ball wide receiver ADPs. Today we continue the conversation going over the running back position over on Underdog Fantasy. You see our promo code QR code right there on the screen. If you haven't yet already signed up for Underdog Fantasy, go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog. Use promo code Fantasy Alarm. You get a $100 deposit match. Sorry, 100% deposit match up to $100. We're running best ball drafts with the family all week long here. No better time than now to jump into it. We got the best ball invitational on Thursday. That's going to be live streamed here on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm social channels. So we got a lot going on here when it comes to best ball fantasy football, Coop. So we figured why not start breaking down some of these positional tiers, man.
Yeah, and if you want to draft with us, jump in the Fantasy Alarm Discord. They move quickly, though. So you got to get in there, especially when Howard Bender jumps in one. Those fill in like 10 minutes, right? He's in the slow draft now. So make sure you're all set up. We got a bunch of promo codes going right now to get signed up with Fantasy Alarm. The one I like best, promo code COOP, COOP, gets you 6 months, 50% off. But anyway, John, let's get into it. Enough, talking about the stuff we got going on. Let's talk about the ADP on Fantasy Alarm for running backs. Well, actually, on Underdog.
100%. I mean, listen, this is I think maybe this is the biggest story you and I almost wanted to discuss here. We have only 3 running backs with a first-round ADP this year. As of now, again, these are the most recent updated ADP numbers over from Underdog Fantasy in best ball drafts. We have just 3 running backs going in the first round. That shows just the dramatic change in landscape, it feels like, when it comes to fantasy football, when it comes to best ball fantasy football formats. Everybody is so worried about injuries. They're looking at a lot of these backfields that are now shared backfields, and they're looking at a format maybe where this is, this is a half PPR, 3 wide receiver format. Wide receivers are going early and often, so talk to me, Coop. Christian McCaffrey goes number 3 right now. Bijan Robinson and Austin Eckler are your only 3 running backs going in the first round. Bijan going around pick 7, and Austin Eckler going almost out of the first round, average ADP of 11.5 right now.
It's crazy, man. I started playing back in 2002, and back then it was all running backs in the first round. Like, that's just how it worked. The first couple rounds even.
Yeah.
Because even guys like Thomas Jones, who, would finish like RB 14, 15, he'd have like 1,500, 1,600 yards from scrimmage. So I went back and looked at some old ADPs. You don't even have to go back to when I started playing in 2002. I went back to 2007. The first 10 picks of the draft were all running backs. We're talking LaDainian Tomlinson, Steven Jackson, Larry Johnson, Frank Gore, Sean Alexander. Just a monster time for it. The 11th pick wasn't a wide receiver. It was Peyton Manning. And then it went back to multiple running backs. The first running back off the board at ADP, number 15, 16, 17, Steve Smith, Chad Johnson, Marvin Harrison. So we're living in a totally different era now. Only 3 running backs. Now it's dominated by wide receivers. So, when I look at these ones, I have no problem picking any of them. The one I find myself picking the least of is Bijan Robinson. I got a couple, and that's mostly because I drafted a few picks of him early on. Right. And now I just don't feel, now that his ADP is 7 overall, I find myself taking a wide receiver in that spot. So I'll take McCaffrey at his spot. I found myself taking a wide receiver. And then you're the guy that was right about Austin Eckler last year. And part of that this year makes me say, why am I drafting Bijan here if Austin Eckler's not even gone yet?
Yeah, listen, I'll touch on these 3 running backs too, because we once again, Coop, in our Discord, again, we love all of our subscribers, all of our family members there. Someone saying they don't have an interest in Christian McCaffrey. They have the number 1 overall pick. They were asking if they could take Bijan number 1 overall. They didn't have any interest in CMC because of his injury history. Christian McCaffrey played all 17 games last year, folks. He was the RB2, only behind Austin Eckler, by the way. We're not we're not doctors. We say this all the time. Do not be afraid of Christian McCaffrey's injury history, because last year that blew up in your face, and you probably took Jonathan Taylor over Christian McCaffrey due to the injury history, and look how that turned out for you, right?
It happens all the time, dude. People try to be Dr. Fortune Teller, trying to guess which currently healthy players get hurt. We saw it with Dalvin Cook. Like, people were the years you could get him in the second round, right? We saw it with Joe Mixon, right? Like, Joe Mixon the year before last, everyone's like, oh, he burned me. If someone says he's burned me before, I circle that player. Like, that's the guy I want, right? Like, that's the dude that if people are fading him for irrational reasons, I'm in. Christian McCaffrey last year, obviously. The difference for me is if the player is actually hurt, right? So if the player's hurt right now, or it's August and they're hurt, fade those guys away.
100%.
Fade them all you want,
I
because
agree with you.
that's a different story. But
So Christian McCaffrey for me, I'm in on. Bijan Robinson, I agree with you. Listen, if he falls a little bit, fine, maybe. But I told you right before we jumped on here, I've been in position where I'm drafting in the middle of a best ball draft, and I have Bijan Robinson on the board. I've taken Austin Eckler over him. Austin Eckler last year, RB1 in fantasy football. The year before that, RB2 in fantasy football. And yet he is going almost out of the first round here. And I understand there's a lot of reporting, narratives, rumors that the Chargers are going to bring in another running back. And there's a lot of bigger names out there like an Ezekiel Elliott, like a Leonard Fournette, where people are worried that they'll finally bring in a capable running back, capable in quotations, that can handle some of the heavier workload, maybe steal some of that goal line work. You know, we joke about Ezekiel Elliott being a fullback as how efficient he is in the red zone, but they haven't done that yet. And he's still going to be an electric part of that passing offense. And they're not just going to push him to the side. He's still going to be a guy that is involved in the offense. So when I've had the opportunity to take Bijan, I want to go running back, I've taken Austin Eckler in that spot. I'm not going to sit here and say I have 0 shares of Bijan Robinson. We're in 30, puppy bowl drafts at this point, even though they're already locked. I have some shares in different spots, but if I'm playing one draft and I'm in the spot where I want to take a running back and it's Bijan or it's Eckler, I'm taking Eckler over Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I've already done enough of these drafts where I have shares of virtually every player. I even have an Amon-Ra St. Brown share. Can you believe it?
I cannot believe you. I mean, listen, then again, who else are they throwing to for the first 6 weeks of that season, right? So,
no, apparently it was a draft full of just me, because I sat there looking around saying, like, is no one going to take this guy? I finally did. I think I get him like the 3rd round. I'm not even kidding.
Well, if you read enough propaganda articles against him, Coop, eventually those people will start fading him, and then you can describe him as a great.
And then maybe I'm in. I'm still probably mostly out. But, again, we have exposure to all these guys, but it's about who we like best. So from that group, it's hard to. We're kind of splitting hairs with the first round guys, but that's where we're at. What about the second round, John?
Yeah, second round's interesting, right? A lot of guys that I think have some pretty strong potential here. Jonathan Taylor is going at the very beginning of the second round. Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, and Tony Pollard. Now, I tweeted about Nick Chubb. I know that we have, Kev Tompkins. He might even be watching right now. He's a big anti-Nick Chubb guy in the sense that he doesn't have like that 101 overall capabilities. My tweet referencing was basically like, listen, there's no Kareem Hunt there anymore. They don't really have anybody behind him. I understand, and this is where I laugh a little bit. It's okay to use the sample size for one argument, but then not an argument, but you can't use the sample size for another argument. So when I tweeted this out about Nick Chubb, immediately everybody was like, well, what about those 5 games with Deshaun Watson? It's like Deshaun Watson missed like 2 years. He was clearly rusty. The offense was struggling at that point. But Nick Chubb was an absolute animal for the first half of the season. He was right up there as one of the 101 RBs in that conversation. If the offense gets better with Deshaun Watson in year 2, tell me how that isn't going to impact Nick Chubb. He can have higher touchdown equity. He can run for more yards. I mean, and he has some ability to catch the football. He's not going to go be a 60 catch player, but how long did you say Derrick Henry never catches the football and then he pops out with 30 catches? If Nick Chubb goes and catches 35 passes this year, 40 passes this year, because some of those throws go to him, how are we not at least having the conversation that Nick Chubb in the second round is a strong value? That's just kind of where I sit with it.
I honestly love all these second round running backs for the most part. First, I just want to shout out to Chris Smith in the chat. When you said who else the line's going to throw to, Sam Laporta. I love that comment. I'm here for all pro Sam Laporta propaganda on this show.
Right.
But for me, when I look at this second round, and especially in Underdog, which is a half PPR format, this isn't even full PPR. Mm-hmm. So I have no problem taking Jonathan Taylor if I can get him in the second round. Obviously, we're going to lose some receptions probably with the mobile quarterback, but you have to understand with this RPO, he's probably going to run for 6 yards a carry, 7 yards a carry. Whatever J.K. Dobbins is doing with a mobile quarterback in the RPO, and now he's going to be running behind Quentin Nelson, so a pretty good offensive setup there. Jonathan Taylor can absolutely do that. I'll take Taylor. He's going to pick 13. Barkley at pick 16. Chubb at 21. For the first time ever, I am in on Tony Pollard. The reason we weren't in on Tony Pollard was because Zeke was getting high leverage
Yeah.
plays. He was getting the goal line. He was getting the receptions. So I'm in there, and I'm also in on the guys. They're going early third, and we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, maybe a little hesitant on Derrick Henry, but Josh Jacobs, why isn't he going in the second round? Right? He does when I draft near this thing.
Right. I mean, the guy who led the league in rushing last year, right? Like,
Exactly.
why are we fading that? Yeah, I agree with you. You know, Jonathan Taylor, I'm a little on again. We've seen they're definitely going to be super run heavy, so that's gonna benefit him. That offensive line last year for the Colts was actually pretty bad. Quentin Nelson had one of his worst seasons, graded by PFF. You know, so they do need that offensive line to take a step forward. But we've also saw what happened when bad quarterback play is there, and bad quarterback play does not help a running back because teams do not have to worry about them really throwing the football, and they just stack it. And Taylor's running against 8-man boxes here. That I worry a little bit about. Barkley's super intriguing because I actually do think that the Giants are just going to continue to take a step forward. You got a really good head coach in there. He's putting a good system in place. As long as Barkley's going to be able to step on the field, I know that they're dealing with some contract issues there with him. If he's healthy and on the field, I love Saquon Barkley. You want to talk about guys with that 101 upside, Saquon Barkley's that guy. He can go out there and catch 70 passes. He can go out there and run for 1,600 yards. So I love Saquon Barkley in the second round. That's kind of where I'm going. Where I'm going at.
I feel that. So with Jonathan Taylor, to me, like he's more of a. I kind of group players into three groups. There's guys I'm reaching for. There's guys I'm taking an ADP, and there's guys I'm only taking if they slide. Jonathan Taylor to me is a guy I'm taking at ADP, and kind of if he slides a bit. So it's like if I take a wide receiver in the first round and I get to like the mid-second, I'm grabbing him. But you're right. I'm not going to go out of my way to take him because we don't know. Like if Anthony Richardson comes out and plays just like Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields, where he's not targeting the RB at all, he's taking all the goal line carries himself. Yeah, it's gonna hurt his upside. But
Right.
I think he's a very safe pick in terms of that.
Sure.
Tony Pollard, are you in on Tony Pollard,
Yeah.
John?
Yep. Definitely in on him again. As of right now, the backup running back to him is Ronald Jones or Vaughn, the kid they drafted. That's like 5'6". You know, they don't really have much behind Tony Pollard. So the belief here should be that he's that full guy. 3 down back. We know he can catch the football. We know he has breakaway speed. I guess my one question, and it's not really a worry because we just talked about you can't hammer guys on injuries that they don't have yet. But we've never seen him be a full workload guy, right? So that's where it's not a hesitation, but it's in the back of my mind a little bit. We've never seen him be a guy do 3 downs for a full season. He's had opportunities last year to be that guy, and he was ridiculously good, obviously, when Zeke went out. But, for a full season, can he handle it? I guess we'll find out. I'm surprised that you're not in on Derrick Henry.
So I'm not necessarily that I'm out, and we have to see what happens with this team and there's rumors that Henry could be traded. There's rumors that Tannehill could be traded. I'm a little bit worried that they didn't move in the directions you would think a team competing now would move in. Like if they're trying to win now, why weren't they in on guys like Adam Thielen or even Marvin Jones? They didn't bring anything in. Like if you're going to try and win one last time before Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill move along, I would have done a little more to try and win now. That's all for me.
Sure.
That like I would have been. I like to see that urgency from these teams. I'm wondering if maybe they're sitting there waiting for after June 1 where they can spread out the cap hit and they just say, hey, you know what? We're moving on. We're going with Will Levis and Treylon Burks and Chig and going into the new era here. So I don't know. I'm a little hesitant on that.
Yeah, but that would still be good for Derrick Henry if it's Will Levis.
Yeah, that's true. And
if
Derrick Henry gets traded,
the guy that moves, but this I don't think that would be I don't think that's the because they don't have anybody behind him, so they didn't bring anybody to replace Derrick Henry. If they made a move to draft their running back early,
third round pick, Tajay Spears.
Yeah, but he's not a guy that's going to replace Derrick Henry.
You never know, man. You never know. I've seen our New England Patriots pick the different back every single year and replace the guy every single year. So it's I know Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry, but he's 30 years old.
People have been doubting Derrick Henry for 3 years now. The guy just continues to be the number one running back. So I have no worries with Derrick Henry here, unless I guess, of course, if they decide to move on. But I don't think Tajay Spears is someone they're willing just to turn the keys over to right away. as the future of their backfield here. I like Breece Hall a lot in this spot here as well. Third round, other third round running backs: Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, and Travis Etienne. I have been taking Breece Hall. By all accounts, he's ready to go. He was super explosive, and now we're expecting the Jets offense to be better, right? With Aaron Rodgers and the weapons they have, and got to go into the season with a healthier offensive line. And that offensive line, name talent wise, pretty damn loaded, right? If they can just stay healthy, Breece Hall, it can be easily, I think, outproduces ADP, and I've been grabbing him when available.
Yeah, absolutely. It's different you have to look at each injury differently. I've looked at a number of studies with the ACLs. If you have just the ACL or an ACL plus like a cartilage or meniscus or one of like the smaller issues, those guys have like an 80% chance of coming back, right? If you have an ACL and MCL, now it's like 70%. The scary ones are the combos. When it's ACL, LCL, or ACL, PCL, odds are down at like 55% that guys even come back at all. And a lot of times in the first year back, they're not at full strength. A guy like Breece Hall, where we already see him on a treadmill in January and February, and now they're talking about him being ready to go to start the season. I'm willing to draft a guy like that. We'll talk about Javonte Williams in a little bit. He might be falling more towards the J.K. Dobbins line. He had a ACL, MCL, and PCL, which is honestly an example would be that's like what Marcus Lattimore had. I'm not sure if you remember him from South Carolina. You know, the 49ers gave him a shot, but he never came back. With Javonte, the reports now are that he's on the right track, but that's a lot different than this guy.
I was going to say, like, what do you make of the reports that like he could be ready for training camp? I mean, if that's true,
if that's true, well, there's a difference between running now and ready for training camp, because it's not like you wake up in the morning and hop out of bed like Grandpa Joe and you just run off to a chocolate factory and everything's great.
Right.
Like, you have to be ready, and then you have to get back into game shape, and then you're playing at a high level. So if Breece Hall is, ready, quote unquote, now, that means he's basically getting into game shape, getting up to speed, and getting that strength back by September.
Right.
If he's just getting back up and running in September, I'm just not going to draft him, because that's what J.K. Dobbins is posting videos of himself being like, yep, I'm up, I'm running now. And he was not ready. Right.
Yep. I agree with you. Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson. They brought in James Robinson. I sent you the tweet, James Robinson talking about his ability to catch the football. He says he's a very natural receiver. You've long talked about how New England is historically an offense that uses two running backs, one to run the football, one to catch the football. Ramondre Stevenson was being looked at as a guy that could be a top 10 style running back because of his ability to do both. Do those comments from Robinson, where were you knowing the history of the Patriots offense?
No, I think the coaching staff probably made it pretty clear that somebody's going to contribute on pass downs, whether that's Ty Montgomery or Pierre Strong or James Robinson. They probably just told these guys, hey, this guy's a starting running back. There is going to be another role here, right? The problem that the Patriots have had this whole time is that they've made that pass catching back a focal point for 20 years. They've always had a pass catching back that's better at catching passes than the starter. So when push came to shove, and when it was 3rd and 3 and they needed that first down, it was Kevin Falk. It was Danny Woodhead. It was obviously James White, Deion Lewis. Like, they always had that guy that was better. I don't think anybody here is better than Ramondre Stevenson in catching the ball. So when you get in those high leverage situations where you have to have it, I think it is actually still going to be Ramondre, even though in the past it has been a different guy.
Right.
I could be wrong on that. Maybe James Robinson is just flat out better at catching Ramondre. Maybe because Bill O'Brien was there from 2007 to 2011, they want to run those offenses. Those are some of the best offenses I've ever seen, John. Right? Like 2007, 2011.
It helps having Tom Brady. Yeah.
Right. Of course. Yeah. But arguably best offenses of all time.
Yeah.
So if they want to recreate that setup, they can do that. I mean, part of me that looks at this and suggests they won't do that is that they didn't go and add a fullback, right? Like, if you're going to recreate that offense, don't you need to recreate the personnel? So I'm wondering if maybe they did turn over a new leaf and they're just looking to supplement this guy. The way he played last year, man, give me Ramondre. Also, just want to shout out, thank you guys hanging out in the chat. I know you guys listening on the podcast can't see it, but join us when we go live, whenever you get a chance. We got Mr. Scampers in the chat. We got Albert in the chat. We got Joel out here. Yeah, weigh in, throw some questions in. We'll answer them as we go along, man.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us.
Get into YouTube and go ahead and ask us some questions here. We'll talk some general fantasy, best ball fantasy, whatever you want. We're in here.
Whatever.
Travis Etienne, Coop. Again, we're looking to see Jacksonville take that step forward again this season. They're adding Calvin Ridley back into their offense. The one thing that we expected out of Etienne last year was his involvement in the passing game, because that's what they told us they were going to do, right? They were going to spread him out. They're going to use him in all these different situations. Didn't really throw him the football all that much, but he was still a very productive running back running the football. Do you find that he fits in this third round ADP comparatively to the other backs that are around him?
He fits here because his ceiling is very high, but his floor is low. And Travis Etienne right now he's falling into the tail as old as time. Young running back comes in the league, struggles with the pass blocking scheme. We've seen it multiple times, and we've seen guys overcome it, right? Like Joe Mixon finally overcame it, figured it out. Some guys we've seen not overcome it. Phillip Lindsay, the best example. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, could not figure out the scheme. These pass blocking schemes are a lot more complex than they look on TV. On TV, it looks like running back stands next to the quarterback, guy breaks through the line, running back picks him up, right? Like that's what we think it is. It's really a lot of them are a counting system. You sit there and you count how many guys are on each side, and the guard knows who he has, and you're supposed to know who you have. If you can't figure that out, you become such a big liability that you're coming out of the game, right? So, and that's what happened to Travis Etienne last year. He just could not figure it out. It seemed pretty clear to me based on the grades and the pressures he was letting up, considering how few pass snaps he was getting. If he can figure out that portion of the game, his ceiling is massive because he's great with the ball in his hands. But if he can't and he ends up being a liability, that's the scary part. So I'm still drafting him because I believe in the upside. But in your redraft leagues, if the first couple of weeks he's not getting a big number of pass snaps, you should trade him. And we'll keep an eye on that for you. We'll be talking about all that stuff, with our weekly show when the season gets going. But that's what you got to keep an eye on early on. Even if he doesn't catch a bunch of passes, if he plays 15, 20 pass snaps week one, it's wheels up.
Can we talk about how the fact that we're basically in the fourth round at this point, and we just came out of RB12? So the RB1s now, we're going into RB2s here in the fourth round, where in the past, we might be on the RB3 tier going into the third or fourth round here. So just, again, the change in ideology around fantasy football and best ball fantasy football in particular here, with the fact that so many running backs now are falling back into the draft. So in the fourth round, we got three running backs. We got RB13, Najee Harris, RB14, Jahmyr Gibbs, and RB15, Kenneth Walker. Some interesting players here. Obviously, Najee Harris, we know the struggles with that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. He was an absolute volume monster there in year one, a ton of volume in year two, just wasn't able to be nearly as productive. Jahmyr Gibbs, the Lions stunned the world, taking Jahmyr Gibbs where they did, but that should at least be, in my opinion, an indication of their opinion of the player and how they plan to deploy this player. So while you can call that a pick dumb all you want, if he's going to be an every down back for them, then it's what the Lions needed to do. And then Kenneth Walker, we were all ready to go, and then they go ahead and draft a backup behind him there. It was a Charbonnet, right? Was that who they ended up going with there?
Zach Charbonnet, great player. So what I'm going to do with Kenneth Walker, it's the same thing we did when we talked about DK Metcalf and a couple guys on the wide receiver episode last week. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. We do the same thing. And at this point with the wide receivers, it was insane. Like maybe 30 had gone. I'll pull it up in a second, but complete opposite. Wide receivers are flying. But what we did is, what we're doing right now is we're taking the yellow caution tape and we're wrapping it around DK Metcalf, and we're not drafting him right now. And we're going to wait and see how far that ADP falls with the Jackson Smith and Jigba pick. And if it falls far enough, then he'll be back on our menu. Right. But these rolling ADPs, they update every 2 days or so. We haven't found the full value. We haven't found the floor value of where Kenneth Walker is going to be drafted. He's already coming down, but I'm going to wait and see how far down he can go, and then we'll decide if we're going to take him. So right now, I'm just not doing it at round 4. If he gets to like round 6, yeah, of course. You know what I mean? It's like no different than drafting David Montgomery, right? So, but David Montgomery, because of Swift, is already being drafted way down, right? So he's already round 8. I don't see a huge difference between those two guys at this point. Now, John, I want to ask you, because we did this last year. We looked at the ADPs for guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and we said, okay, Tua is going so far down. Either these guys are being overdrafted or Tua is being underdrafted. Right now, I'm seeing something very similar happen with Kenny Pickett. Now, you have to believe in the quarterback to a certain degree, but we have to kind of decide, are we in or are we out on that offense? They have a ton of weapons, right? Play caller, Matt Canada, a little dicey. We have to decide if we're in or out. If Kenny Pickett takes a step forward, Najee Harris at this pick is going to be a bargain. I
Sure.
mean, so that's the question, John. I don't
It's
know.
still an offensive line question for me too, though. I mean, the reason that he has struggled so much also is the fact that there's been no offensive line in Pittsburgh here. I'm gonna see if I can pull up quickly what PFF had their grade.
The Dolphins did go out and get Teron Armstead, the best available offensive lineman. They spent picks on Austin Jackson. They went out, got Connor Williams. So they did make moves, though. The Steelers did trade up to take Broderick Jones in the first round. It's still the Patriots traded them that pick, and it was reportedly one of the players the Jets were interested in. So I love that whole transaction. Worked out really well for.
So I mean that's kind of like the key, right? They can they get an offensive line that can protect. Last year they ranked 16th in PFF at the end of the season, so right in the middle of the pack. The year before that they were like dead last. So they made some improvements, as you mentioned, and they addressed it in the draft. If that offensive line can get better, then I think there's hope, right? Because you got to be able to open up lanes for Najee Harris and keep Kenny Pickett upright for that offense to kind of to move. So there's definitely, from a volume standpoint, some good potential there with Najee Harris. And you're looking at this tier, and I don't think many people really are going to attack it as much. I think you're looking at the guys that are going back after them, and this is a spot where you're taking a quarterback, a tight end, or a wide receiver probably for many. Or these guys are, you're starting to grab an RB3 here if you went RB early or something.
Let me phrase it in a way that makes it easier for the listeners that are just listening. Najee Harris and Jahmyr Gibbs, their ADPs are both 38.5 and 38.6. It's a pick 'em. Kenneth Walker's going at 46, which is a full half round later, and we're not taking him. After that, you got Aaron Jones and Miles Sanders going at pick 55.
Yeah.
So we're talking a full 17 picks later. So you're either taking one of these two guys or you're waiting. So let's move on to the other guys now, John.
Oh, I just want to say that I actually like Jahmyr Gibbs.
So you would take Gibbs over Najee?
I would. So my reasoning for Gibbs, one, it's the draft capital investment. They used the 12th overall pick on him. And then they basically cleaned house at the running back position. They don't have any, but they have David Montgomery, obviously. But I don't think you're using the 12th pick on a guy that you don't intend to feature. I think Montgomery has a chance to play in the red zone. I think that's good for him. You look at the role that we saw Williams have last year. I think maybe Montgomery holds some of that. But I think you're going to see a lot of Gibbs used in the early downs in the passing game here. So I actually don't mind taking Gibbs if I was to pick a running back of that group.
And I'll give you a great example. They have a great offensive line now, right? Frank Ragnow, Penei Sewell. We watched a similar situation unfold, right? I mean, a lot of parallels with the Saints when they drafted Alvin Kamara. They had Adrian Peterson and Mark Ingram. They drafted Kamara. They traded Peterson, right? So the Lions have had David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, drafted Gibbs, and they've traded Swift. In that year, Mark Ingram had 1,500 yards from scrimmage and 12 touchdowns. He was an RB1. He was like RB7. And Alvin Kamara had 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns, and he was RB3. So there's a world where both these guys are worth their picks.
And we just talked about they have no real wide receivers for 6 weeks outside of like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So,
and as Chris pointed out, Sam Laporta.
As well. So we'll go into this next round, like you mentioned, round 5. Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders, J.K. Dobbins. Aaron Jones is another guy that I've been taking a lot of. I think the uncertainty around Jordan Love and that maybe Dylan, it could be the guy this year or take another step forward, though he didn't really do that last year when everybody expected him to do so. Maybe Love is, no Aaron Rodgers hurts Aaron Jones. But to me, I think it just means they're going to rely on the running game a little bit more with the young, inexperienced quarterback. So I like Aaron Jones a lot, and Miles Sanders for sure. I am unsure what to do with J.K. Dobbins, but the other two I am fine with going.
I'm just not taking J.K. Dobbins because I find myself taking a ton of Jones. I mean, I love Miles Sanders. I take him virtually every draft, honestly, just because I love the setup. I think he's good.
We've been king Miles Sanders for years, and then last year we don't take him really. And
I wrote the article last year. I wrote an article. Miles Sanders.
True,
Right?
it's true. We weren't.
dead
I
zone
wasn't as high. I didn't get to him last year. I was taking Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown instead, and then Sanders has the best season of his life. So,
Well, and the crazy part about it, John, is that the season could have been even better. Like,
yeah, all those
he
touchdowns.
had a good season, but Jalen Hurts had 13 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts leads all players in rushing touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, despite getting hurt. He was second in carries inside the 5-yard line. That's why I think with this new team, you know what? His yards per carry is going to go down, but I don't care as much about that as I do about receptions and touchdowns.
Sure.
He only had 20 receptions last year, but when
they
he was
claim
playing
they want to throw him the football here too, and I saw someone tweet out that they don't know Miles Sanders can't catch. They only have Chuba Hubbard there, so it's not like he can really catch football either. So,
and the thing is, it's like you have to make a decision when it comes to, like, everyone says, "Oh, you got to zig while everyone zags." Well, here's the thing: if you draft running backs early, then you not only miss out on the early wide receivers, but you're also sitting there and saying to yourself, well, why did I take all these guys early? I could have just taken Miles Sanders and Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook. So I actually find myself kind of riding the wave and taking wide receivers early, knowing that in the 5th and 6th rounds, I can get 1 or 2 of these guys, man. And it's not just this round. There's only 3 of them going this round: Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders, J.K. Dobbins. This next round, there's a couple guys that I love too. Yeah. So I love just waiting and getting a couple wide receivers. A lot of people like to just get a tight end early and forget about it. I don't blame them, So I'm always looking for late round guys, but I do not. If you want to take Travis Kelce, I don't blame you at all. If you want to take Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts.
I've been grabbing Hawk when he's been available.
Yeah,
so because it fits. It's easy to stack Minnesota that way. If you go Jefferson, Hawk, and you get Cousins late. So if you want to go there. Speaking of Minnesota, Dalvin Cook's ADP keeps falling. He's at 67 point now, and there continues to be rumors that he's going to be moved on. You wrote the article, the June 1 article, that Dalvin Cook could very much be a cut candidate there. If he gets cut, though, there have been teams that he is linked to, and teams that he is linked to would just kind of seemingly indicate that he would be just as valuable. Miami being one of the notable options for him there. I know Miami has a ton of running backs, but if they were to bring in Dalvin Cook, there's unlikely a scenario where they're going to keep Wilson and Mostert, and they drafted A-Chain. So like Dalvin Cook feels like they would sign him to be their guy in this offense for at least a year. What are your thoughts on Dalvin Cook here and his continued fall in ADP?
Yeah, little caveat in that I was going to do the research, I thought when I told you, I was like, yeah, it's going to be a potential cut candidate. But more research I did, he's not a candidate really to be cut. He could be if they look at the trade market and decide there's nothing there and then cut him. But the Vikings actually, when they cut Adam Thielen, they could have designated him a post two cut, which would have allowed them to move half of his salary cap to next year. They didn't do that, right? They could cut Dalvin Cook today and designate him a post June 1 cut. Every team gets 2 of those. Right. What they're doing, I think, is they think they can trade him. And if you trade someone post June 1, you get that benefit as well, right? So I think there are a lot of teams. DeAndre Hopkins might be in this boat. There's an article right now up on Fantasyland that talks about the guys I think fit this bill. I think they're waiting and saying, hey, let's trade this guy. Worst case scenario, maybe they do cut him. But like you said, I mean, what if one of these guys gets cut and they land on Miami and now they're running behind Teron Armstead? They're starting running back there. Like there's a lot of spots where these guys could end up in a better position. So I'm willing to draft most guys from this group. The one
Dameon Pierce, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco are your 6th round running backs.
One I'm not really drafting at all out of this group is Dameon Pierce. And that's another one where he, to me, fits the bill of the same problem that Travis Etienne has, except they went out and addressed it. They brought in Devin Singletary, who is great on pass downs. He's great in pass protection. He ran the 5th most routes of any running back last season. And after the very first game, Lovie Smith came out and said, we need to fix this so this doesn't happen again. And the context was, why wasn't Dameon Pierce playing? Why wasn't he getting the ball? And that's what it was. He said, we need to fix the pass blocking so this doesn't happen again. Well, I went through the season. That was one of his better games, pass blocking graded out. He did not grade out as a good pass blocker. He was outside the top 120 running backs. Not sure. For those keeping track at home, there's only 32 teams. So if you're outside the 100 running backs, you're clearly not the best on your team. You're probably not even top 3 on other teams. So I think that backfield is going to be split. Of this group, That's a player I have not drafted one time, Dameon Pierce. He's a
Yeah,
hard runner,
I just don't
obviously.
want a lot of the Houston offense in
No,
general. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, they're so cheap and stackable in best ball." It's like,
fool's
sure, I get the appeal to it because you can get every one of their players basically in round 12 or after, except for the running back here. But I mean,
I first started playing this game, like, when I was early, not even later on, like, when I was still in, like, college and stuff, I thought I was so sneaky doing that same exact thing you're describing, John. I would
right,
say "Well, he's the number 1 wide receiver on his team," you know?
yeah,
That how many times did I draft Greg Little from the Browns or, like, one of these guys and just
right.
Dwayne Bowe. Dwayne
He
Bowe had
gets
that one good
and
year.
he catches 700 yards and like 50 passes. And you're like, oh, right, they
Oh,
still suck.
right. Right, the
So
best yeah. If you look at the top 20 wide receivers last year, 10 of them came from the same
same
5
team,
team,
right?
right? Like half of them came from the Eagles or Bengals or whatever, so
Yeah,
I stopped doing that. I mean, I still do it sometimes, but I do it way later in the draft. I don't do it right now. I don't take Dameon Pierce because he's a starting running back for the Texans. Ooh,
right.
the Texans have the worst odds of any team to win the Super Bowl,
Mhm.
right? So I'm out on that. I'll take Singletary later, though. We'll talk about him if
What are
we
your
get there.
thoughts on DeAndre Swift with Philly now? They also have Rashad Penny there. Any
No,
interest at all?
no, I think his ADP is still. This is another
Falling?
one. He's a caution tape guy. He's a caution tape guy for me because I think his ADP is still working its way down. It doesn't happen overnight though. It's like
Sure.
so we look at the ADP. We pulled this ADP a week ago. It has changed since then, but you can't. It doesn't go overnight from round 4 down to round 7. It has to trickle down because there's too many auto drafts. There's too many bots. Right. There's too many
Yeah.
people that don't know what they're doing. That don't know what's going on. So it does take a while to reset. So I stay away. But John, I got to ask you, last guy from this tier, Isaiah Pacheco. Are you doing it or not?
Yeah, I'm in. I'm
Yeah.
not going to not take the starting running back for like one of the best offenses in football.
But that's the thing is I look at Pierce and I look at Pacheco and I'm like, what's the difference? I mean, what are you expecting the Chiefs to do with Pacheco that the Texans aren't doing with Pierce?
Right.
They went out and made Singletary a priority. I mean, they're paying Singletary more than the Eagles paid like every back they have, you know?
Right.
So I look at that and I'm like, yeah, Pacheco, he runs just as hard, man. Like he runs, these guys run like problematically hard. Like
Well,
I
it's not
worry
only
when I
that,
watch
but
it.
I mean, if you take a look at the depth chart that they have there, right? I mean, there's not much looking like it's going to completely cut into his workload here. So
Yeah.
I guess it all depends on if there's moves. I mean, they still have McKinnon there, right? So
I just want somebody sign Zeke. Somebody sign Fournette. Like, come on.
right.
These guys, did you see what Ndamukong Suh said the other day on I forget what show it was on, but they asked him, he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play football this year. He's like, I just don't feel like doing training camp. He straight
Yeah.
up said that. Zeke Elliott and Leonard Fournette feel like the exact kind of, yeah, I'll play football, but I'm gonna spend the summer in Cabo type guys. So
Yeah, well, they're looking for their right spot. I think they've both probably settled in the fact that they're not going to be looked on as an every down back anymore, and that's just kind of what they're waiting to see how camp plays out. Right, someone's gonna pull a hammy or pull a groin, the next they're going to bring in Zeke for the final half of training camp and be going into the preseason. So
yeah, well,
okay,
George from the Bay sums up this tier for me in the chat. He said, I have 0 Pierce, 40% Singletary.
yeah.
I'm with you, George. Let's
Yeah.
move on next tier.
All right, 7th round. Cam Akers, Rashad White, James Conner. Pretty interesting group here. You and I were discussing like opinions on Cam Akers, and I told you flat out like I'm drafting him.
Me too.
There's to me, whenever he's shown to be healthy and the team hasn't hated him weirdly for whatever reason, he's ran over everybody. And why I am very afraid of Matt Stafford's arm. As of now, they're telling me Matt Stafford's healthy. I can only trust them that they're telling me Matt Stafford's healthy and that Cooper Kupp is going to be good to go. And if that is true, then that offense should be able to move the football enough. And Cam Akers has been a pretty elite running back. We saw that during the second half of his rookie year, and then we saw it over the final weeks of last season. So I'm willing to give Cam Akers my time here because, one, I'm also not drafting him as, he's RB24, so I guess to somebody he's an RB2, but generally the way I've drafted it, he's really been an RB3 and RB4 or something like that for me.
Yeah, back to back 100-yard rushing games to finish the season. Some call that a small sample size, John. I call it finishing strong.
Right.
If I like
it shows that he can still do it, is what it
if
shows.
I like the play. There's no question he can do it. I watched him, and all those games, it's not like it was pure volume. He was getting like 20 something carries, but every one of those games essentially over 5 yards a carry, right?
With Baker Mayfield as a quarterback. So
with Baker Mayfield as a quarterback, exactly. He caught a couple passes. No problem with him at this pick. No problem with James Conner. James Conner, to me, if he were going higher, I wouldn't be in because you run into the same. Yeah, there you go. Mark Pitts asked thoughts on James Conner. I wonder if that's the Mark Pitts.
It is.
Mark Pitts, shout out, dude. James Conner. For me, I look at Dameon Pierce and I say, why in the world would I draft Dameon Pierce if I can draft James Conner next round? Right. Because it's the same thing that the Cardinals have I don't know if people realize that the Cardinals are doing a full bridge year with this new regime. They know they're not going to win. Vegas has them with the second worst odds besides the Texans. So if James Conner was going higher, I'd be out. But for me right now, I'm on board with him just in comparison to some of the guys we're taking earlier. So
it's another big volume play too. If
right.
They're going to have not Kyler Murray as their quarterback for the first however long of the season, right? So you get maybe a more traditional quarterback under center if it's Colt McCoy or something like that. And now there are screen plays to be had for James Conner, and there are more running opportunities there for him. So I don't mind James Conner. I also look at that depth chart and I'm like, well, they're a team that could also maybe bring in somebody. Kareem Hunt's still kind of floating around there, right? So we talked about it, right? Hunt, Elliott, Fournette, like big names, just chilling. Somebody's going to sign somebody at some point, right? Kareem Hunt didn't look washed to me like the other two did, so I don't know what's holding him out there for.
Yeah, I think the way it's going to pan out, the way it always does, is these are the exact teams that do sign those veterans, right? Like the Texans are just like, we got to get through this year and get the first pick. We'll sign Rex Burkhead and whatever's left over, right? And you build this like ragtag island of misfit toys that is just affordable guys willing to play on like veteran deals. So I could see them picking up a Kareem Hunt if Kareem Hunt gets desperate. But you're right. I think Kareem Hunt deserves to go to a better situation, unless he wants to do a 1-year prove it deal and try and get back on the horse just by playing on a team where he can catch a bunch of passes.
Right.
But so I look at that like that's a team where the Cardinals people are saying, oh, they'll add another player. And then the other guy in this tier, because we already talked about how we like Cam Akers, Rachaad White, that's another one where I look at guys like, JB Barry, another fantasy analyst. He comes out and says that, he believes they are going to sign somebody else. He doesn't think he loves Rachaad White, but he thinks they are going to sign somebody else.
I mean, 50 catches as a rookie for Rachaad White. Now you tweeted out Tom Brady threw the ball 600 times, 700, whatever number, ridiculous number it was, right? Like they're not going to throw that much with Baker Mayfield, but they may throw that much to the running back still. So I'm okay like stabilizing the receptions, I think, for Rachaad White here. Letting him be a 3-round back would be interesting. He has the size profile to be it. But you look at the depth chart there in Tampa Bay, they need some help. So I agree they'll probably sign somebody, but I don't think it's to take away from Rachaad White. They just used a 3rd-round pick on him last year, and he proved to be pretty capable of being that guy for them. So to me, I'd be surprised if they brought in someone to take over the workload.
Yeah, they also added the ultimate wild card really in Sean Tucker, which Sean Tucker is kind of the comparison for him would be like this year's Justin Ross, which Justin Ross had a congenital spine issue similar to David Wilson and Michael Irvin, but actually worse. And like, no joke, I saw that every team except 4 just ruled him out completely. Just said we're not going to draft him, we're going to sign him. But the Chiefs did sign him, and now there's some rumors that he could play. Sean Tucker apparently has a heart issue that falls into that category where he's a very talented player, but many teams just said we're not going to. Just ruled him out completely because of it. The Buccaneers did pick him up, and if he does get cleared to play, I mean, there's a lot of people that really believe in this guy. So he's a good. I just took him in the last round of one of these drafts. I'm throwing him on the bench for some dynasty drafts, but I mean, there could be a world where we get to week 1 and the Buccaneers don't do anything at all, and Rachaad White is the every down back, and he could be the steal of this round. So
I agree with you there. Next tier, again, now we're getting into some backups and questionable plays, I guess. David Montgomery talked about likely in a split situation. Alexander Madison, people are starting to reach on him with these Dalvin Cook rumors, thinking that they're going to get maybe an RB1 in round 8. They certainly could. Javonte Williams, we touched upon briefly the knee thing. There are reports that he could be ready for spring, but what does that mean? Does that mean he's full 100% ready to go, or like he's just getting on the field and now he needs 6 more weeks to be ready and he lands on IR? And then James Cook, who I've actually been taking in drafts over Damian Harris for Buffalo here. That's your round 8 tier.
Yeah, I have so many. We have so many more drafts and so many leagues to do, John, that I just don't feel compelled to draft Javonte Williams right now.
Sure.
I'll wait and see. Even if he's fully healthy, like guys coming back from an ACL, even when they're ready to go, besides a handful of exceptions that were just ACLs, like
the reason to draft him now is because of the ADP. Because if he gets a green light, he gets the all clear. He now is a 3rd round back, right? So like people are taking the shot on him now, hoping that in 3 months, when we're a month out from the start of the year, that he is ready to go and he gets into a preseason game. And now you're sitting there like, I got Javonte Williams in round 8, right? This is my team. This is my build. And I have this stud RB ready to go. That's why people are taking him now as we're doing this. And that would be the only reason I would consider doing that. You have to be secure in your build. He's not being drafted as your RB2 because he went super heavy wide receiver early. He's got to be a guy that you went maybe hero RB, and he's filling in as an RB4 and RB5 at this point. And then if he hits, you have a home run.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. If you're like you and me or some of our family members like Obi-Wan Outlaw and, Alex Gilday and those guys, and you're going to do 100 of these, then this is where you obviously got to mix in some of these guys. Like if you're going to do 100 best ball drafts and try and diversify and create different builds, you got to take at least one.
It's hard to win Best Ball Mania, so you got to hit a home run on somebody somewhere.
You got to do a little something different. So yeah, take Javonte Williams. I mean, he's one of the teams that's set up for a shootout week 17. It's the Broncos and Chargers, right? Broncos and Chargers, Chiefs and Bengals. We want pieces of these games. Dolphins and Ravens. Those should be high scoring, competitive games in week 17. So you have to think about that in things like Best Ball Mania. So I think Javonte Williams falls in that group. I think from this next tier, Alvin Kamara, he falls in that group as well. David Montgomery, to me, is a guy I'm probably not taking too much of in this format, Best Ball, just because we want boom, bust, high ceiling guys. Yeah. With Gibbs there, he doesn't feel like that to me. In a normal format, like a deep league with 2 running back spots and a flex, and it's half PPR, yeah, I'll consider it.
It's so hard to gauge Jamal Williams last year because of how injured DeAndre Swift was.
Right.
Because Jamal Williams had 17 touchdowns, something like that.
He led the entire league in carries inside the 5-yard line.
So, like, if David Montgomery is that role this year and touchdowns play, then it all depends on what your perception of that offense is going to be in his role. Like, why did they bring him in? I have to assume it's the bigger body, play in the goal line, and be that guy. So I don't mind it again, but I'm taking him not as a guy I am relying on as my RB1, RB2. He's got to be a depth RB play for you at this point. Now, if you're Kev Tompkins, with all the love in the world and you're playing 0 RB, maybe he is your RB1, right? Like Kev is always taking Jamal Williams, and you're hitting on now these guys in this 8, 9, 10 round to just volumize. Somebody's going to hit 1 week, right? And you'll get your points.
Yeah. I mean, in 0 RB in redraft leagues, that's the exact kind of guy that you take. Well, because you need the guy, you need stashes, and you need guys you can start week 1. Right. So if you had gone true 0 RB and you get to round 7, you are loving David Montgomery because you can put him in your lineup week 1 and know that he's going to get carries and he could score
10 carries at least, right? Like,
and then you take at least 2 guys that you can start week 1. Say you take David Montgomery and James Conner, and then later on, that's where you take all the crazy upside plays. Right. So that's the strategy there.
But let's pick up the pace a little bit here, Coop. We got about 10 minutes to go in the show. You mentioned round 9, Alvin Kamara, Zach Charbonnet, AJ Dillon, Brian Robinson here. You mentioned you don't mind Alvin Kamara. Are you worried about that suspension? Do you think the suspension gets pushed off? I mean, we haven't really gone through the full legal proceedings with him yet. So
yeah, I mean, I've seen all of it in the NFL. Remember the Star Caps incident? Like I talked about this briefly yesterday, but a couple Vikings players were, they got bopped for these things called star caps for PEDs, and they were able to push it off for a year and a half, so long that one of the guys actually just retired. They eventually got
Right.
suspended, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm done. I retire, so whatever." So I mean, sometimes they can push these things off so long that it's they get away with it, or maybe they eat the suspension. He misses half the year, but
Right.
that's why you got to mix him in. But I'm not going crazy with it. Moving forward with these next rounds, Johns, let's just pick out the guy that we like best, because the implication is at this point you're just taking, because rounds 9, 12, 13, 14, you can take somebody going in the 14th round right now if that's who
Right.
you really want. So for me, like, I look at this group and the guys I like best from rounds 9 and 10. I like Devon Achane from the Dolphins. Man, this guy, he's ran the crazy fast 40 time, 99th percentile. You know what he said, John? He said he's already up to 197
Yeah.
pounds because he usually does track. I didn't even think of this until he said it. But some of these guys that do both track and football, they never have a chance during the year to put on weight. And
Right.
since he's not doing track for an entire offseason, he's like, yeah, I just bulked up. I'm looking big. So I kind of love that for this guy. And I'm also taking Samaje Perine from this group just because Javonte Williams starts slow. Joe Lombardi and Sean Payton, they love throwing the ball to the running back.
Yep.
Joe Lombardi's done it everywhere he went. Went to the Lions, threw 150 passes to Joik Bell and Theo Riddick. So give me Samaje Perine. He's going to be involved. Anybody else from this kind of group jumps out at you, John?
Yeah, I mean, I was with you on P. Ryan. Again, I don't mind AJ Dillon as a throw in there.
Yeah.
I am not in on Brian Robinson. I'd much rather take Antonio Gibson a little bit later, around 11. Just pass catching potential here. You'll have Sam Howell. Brian Robinson didn't look all that impressive last year. Now, granted, I understand he got shot for crying out loud, and he was a slow to come up there, but he didn't really look overly explosive. He's just a big bruising back. And whenever Gibson would kind of get some extra leash there, he looked like the bigger, faster running back to have. So I don't mind taking some shots on Antonio Gibson. And Jerick McKinnon's in that same ADP tier. As long as he's on the Chiefs, he was literally the league winner, right? Like, we put that in quotations. We hate using that terminology. He popped out of nowhere, and Patrick Mahomes made him just an absolute superstar. I like Isaiah Pacheco as well, but if we're going in best ball drafts, like, why not at this point take another shot on Jerick McKinnon, knowing that he at least has that chemistry with Patrick Mahomes a little bit in that passing game.
Yeah, well, let's see if they bring him back, man. I think he's still floating around, right?
I mean, I just looked. He's showing up on their depth chart. So is he completely still
I thought he was UFA right now, but I don't know. I could see. I think he's going to play this year, and I don't see why they wouldn't bring him back. He is, to me, one of the great what ifs, man, because he had one
spot rack. Wikipedia says he's still on the team, and ESPN still has him on their depth chart. So
yeah, I expect him to be back, honestly, and he's he's great for them last year.
He signed a 1-year deal.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's the spot track's not updated. There you go.
Yep.
So Jerick McKinnon, one of the great what ifs to me, because he had one of the craziest running back combines of all time. 32 reps on the bench press, dude. 30, that's insanity. That's like, that would have been the number one tight end this year. I'm fairly confident. Like, 32 reps is crazy. He just had that really bad knee injury that set him back for years. But last year we saw like what he's capable of even after all that. So good to see him succeed after all that.
Yeah, 1-year deal, a little over $1 million. So
there you go. Perfect. Yeah. So this next tier, round 12, kind of interesting. The only two running backs going in round 12 are both rookies: Kendre Miller, Roschon Johnson. John,
I've drafted both of them. I don't think Donta Foreman's holding a job away from anybody. And I mentioned to you in past streams here, everybody who's championing Khalil Herbert, why do they keep bringing other guys in? They get rid of David Montgomery, and then they bring in Donta Foreman and draft Roschon Johnson. I don't think they trust Khalil Herbert to be the guy. I think that's why they keep bringing in all these other guys to do the job. So they could have easily moved Khalil Herbert to be the RB1 and then drafted Roschon Johnson behind him. They didn't need to sign Donta Foreman. So
I'll tell you the difference maker for me and why Kendre Miller. I'm taking both, but I like Kendre Miller first. Like yesterday, we did a best ball draft. Kendre Miller went, so we took Roschon. But I like Kendre Miller first just because Roschon's playing with Justin Fields, who falls into that Jalen Hurts category of taking himself and doesn't dump down. So that's the
Roschon going ahead of Donta Foreman also interesting because the depth charts read that reverse. So
I know, but the coach did come out the other day and essentially say, hey, you need multiple. He did the old, you need multiple backs in this league, right? And that tells you, okay, maybe there's not a pecking order here, right? We love taking the cheapest guys. If they're all cheap, I'll take them all, but the cheapest guys in ambiguous backfields, right?
Yeah.
So I'll take Donta Foreman later as well. I mean, why not,
Yep.
right?
I've grabbed shares of Kenneth Gainwell late. Again, we talk about we're not injury forecasters here, but Rashard Penny and DeAndre Swift are the two backs ahead of him
Yeah,
on that depth chart.
you're going to play that game. Those are the guys you play it with.
Those are the guys to play it with, exactly. So I've taken some Gus Edwards late in drafts here as well. How about for you?
I like Gus, man. Gus, one of the few backs. It's crazy that when you look at backs with over 400 carries, there's only like 6 or 7 that have a yards per carry over 5, right? And it's like the guys you would think for the most part, Chubb and Jonathan Taylor and Miles Sanders and Gus Edwards. Like, and he's a 240-pound short yardage back, but he averages over 5 yards a carry. Like Gus, he's that dude. There's a reason they signed him to keep him there. So, and that's a guy, he's going 17th round. So I'm taking him with the last couple picks. Absolutely. In this range, before we wrap it up, John, I want to ask, Zeke goes around here. Leonard Fournette goes around here. Are you doing that at all?
Yeah, I've grabbed him, Hunt, and Elliott in different drafts.
Yeah, why not, right?
I agree with you. Let me get your opinion on one guy quickly before getting a couple minutes left. Zamir White. Any interest in Zamir White? He's another guy that I've taken with like the last pick in best ball drafts for me. You look at you talk combine results, right? The guy ran at 4.40. He profiles big, 6 feet, 215. Didn't really play much last year. Obviously, he's a rookie, but didn't need to because Josh Jacobs was there. But I don't know. Jacobs is only on the year. Like, Zamir White is kind of interesting to me.
I'll tell you, like, right now, especially with the very last pick, you look at what these guys are saying. When Darren Waller got traded, Josh Jacobs he did not mince his words. He says, I don't like that. And then Devontae Adams just yesterday was like, I think that I can help this quarterback. They have plans for this quarterback that I don't think is good for him. Like, it is crazy how they're coming out and just saying, like, if it came out today and somebody just punched Josh McDaniels in the face, I would not be surprised. Right? You know what I mean? So, like, it is getting kind of wild over there. So, yeah, whenever things are getting dicey like that and people are speaking up, those are the people that get shipped out.
Yeah, I just look at athletic profiles, right? Everything about Zamir White screams like could be a guy that finds a role, takes a job, something happens to Jacobs, and he's not costing you anything. He's basically costing you the last pick in your draft.
We're taking a lot of second string running backs before this. Let me tell you, like way before this.
Sure.
Know? So absolutely.
Left, Coop. Give me some other deep darts for you.
Yeah, so it's like you get to this last round and you just got to pick somebody. Like, I have no problem taking Zach Evans, is another guy who I liked his profile. He was like the number 1 running back coming out of high school. We took him with the last pick last night. That one's kind of interesting. Izzy Abanikanda. I don't like where he landed, but there was so much smoke. And then James Robinson. I mean, like, the Patriots, even if they're going to have a primary back, someone else is going to play, right? And this is a team that wants to run. They want to run a lot. And when they went out of their way to sign this guy to a 2-year deal.
They gave him 2 years.
They basically gave him like more than what Damon Harris got. So, like, it just seems weird to me to make that pivot if they're not going to use him at least even a little bit. It's like, I like Ramondre, but last round pick, come on now.
Yep, I agree with you there. So that wraps up our look at the running back best ball ADP over at Underdog Fantasy. Again, go to fantasyalarm.com/Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FANTASYALARM. Get 100% deposit match up to $100. You can also scan that QR code you're looking there on the screen. And then if you're not yet a member of the Fantasy Alarm family, we got a great deal going on right now. Promo code NFL50 when you go to fantasyalarm.com/all-pro saves you 50% off the first 6 months. That's $19.98 a month for the first 6 months. And we have a 7-day free trial now included in that. You got access to our brand new spanking shiny looking Discord that Coop set up for everybody there. And we're running best ball drafts daily over there. So get in there, become a member of the family. Coop and I will be back next week breaking down yet another positional ADP tier over for Underdog Fantasy best ball drafts. Good luck, everybody. We will